Very good. And I'm going to share screen and we'll go to our slides. And I'm going to ask Janice Landrum if she would get us started.
Absolutely. And I'll start with an announcement that I just got a message about a minute ago that my internet is unstable for no other reason. So if I freeze, somebody else pick up the slack. Welcome everyone today to our meeting. Almost all of you have been at meetings before, so we can do this fairly quickly. We are a faith-based organization with a mission for healing and justice. We are looking for opportunities for active engagement, addressing racial and economic injustice, both on our own and together. We support the work through education and dialogue in an atmosphere of mutual respect.
Janice, are you there?
I am, but I can't move anything. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we hear you
Okay.
fine.
Okay, great. Let me see if I can move the slide. Nope.
Uh, what slide are you all seeing on your screen?
Oh, I now see,
Authoritarian.
I'm sorry, now I see it.
Okay.
Repair respectfully acknowledges the ancestral homelands of the Lenape and other related tribes of the Rivertown regions from Dobbs Ferry to Peekskill and beyond. We recognize their ongoing cultural and spiritual connection to this land, past, present, and future. We're going tonight to try to listen, to understand, and not convince, to speak from our own experience, to share the stage, lean into discomfort, participate to the fullest of each ability, to honor confidentiality. Um, and that means not only uh, not exactly repeating what people say, but not repeating it in a way that others would be able to figure out who might have said. So instead, if you hear something fascinating, invite someone to come to the next meeting or to listen to the recording of the meeting. Ask for a do-over if you say something that isn't exactly how you meant it to come out. But this is also a brave space, so just say it if you have something that is on your heart and seems relevant. To reduce background noise, we're going to ask everyone who is not immediately speaking to mute your microphone, unmute it when you're called on. We recommend that you try the side-by-side gallery view to better follow the discussion, although I also found that this new button that's dynamic gallery kind of works pretty well also because it automatically figures out who's talking and saying something. It can be tricked, but it's worth trying if you'd like. If you want to remain anonymous, write your questions in the comments. I'm sorry, it jumped before I saw. We are recording tonight, as we announced at the beginning of the meeting, excuse me. If you prefer to not be seen, then keep your camera off. Raise your hand physically or digitally to be recognized. Jenny Laughlin is moderating and Ann just started sharing screen. Oh, and now I'm getting Ann's screen.
Okay.
Ann?
Janice, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
And here we are again.
And we're looking forward to the meal that we're all
Yeah.
spiritual food. This is part two. I'm Carl Weber, member of the organizing committee of Repair, along with Janice and Ginny and many others who are on screen tonight. And this is the second program that we're lucky enough to be uh, sharing with you on lessons from the life of Dietrich Bonhoeffer with the general theme of living faith in perilous times. Um, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, of course, lived through perils that we can only begin to imagine, but we now can begin to learn from some of the things that he had to deal with because we ourselves are in some troubling times, which many of us are struggling with figuring out how to deal with them. And Bonhoeffer is one of the role models we can look to for guidance on how to deal with times like these. And once again, as last month, we have as our special guest Pastor Thom Johnson. Thom, so wonderful of you to give your time again to us tonight. Thom
Here.
is former director of the Center for Lutheran Studies at Claremont School of Theology in LA. And he has long been the organizer of the center's annual Bonhoeffer Festival, which just took place last week and had, Thom, you had 600 attendees. Was that a record?
Yeah, it was. It was. We had about 300 in person and about another 600 online,
I,
or I mean 300 online,
I
something around there.
I think that's fantastic, and I guess we're not the only people who are feeling that Bonhoeffer, is especially relevant in these days. So, congratulations on that. I'm so happy that it was so successful. Many of you, I think, already have the handout that Pastor Thom will be using to help lead tonight's meeting. If you don't, you can use the QR code on your screen now to download and to print out the handout if you want. If it is easier for you, you could also find the handout by going to our website, which is repairrivertowns.org, and go to the page with current
I forgot.
activities.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And you should see a link there where you can download the handout. So it would be a good idea to do that because you'll find it very helpful as we go through tonight's program. And Pastor Thom, I wonder if you'd start us off with
Sure,
a meditation as you did last month.
sure. I'm going to use again the book called "I Want to Live These Days with You." It's a daily meditation of Bonhoeffer's works, his writings, all compiled in many ways with the liturgical year in mind. And so it follows rather closely so that you can use it for during those times. But he also, people maybe are not aware that Bonhoeffer was a wonderful poet. He wrote a lot of poetry while he was in jail,
Hmm.
as well as beforehand. And his poetry is, you find it mostly in the letters and papers from prison, but it's quite a powerful. There are kind of prayer poems, and so I'd like to share one. This one's well, the author of this book is entitled "It You Know All Needs." Lord Jesus Christ, you were poor and miserable, imprisoned and abandoned, like me. You know all human needs. You stay with me when no one stands by me. You do not forget me, but look for me. You want to know you. You want me to know you and to come to you. Lord, I hear your calling and follow. Help me. Holy Spirit, give me
Okay,
faith
it's down here. Wait
that
a
we
minute.
will that we will save that will save me from despair and evils. Give me the love for God and other people that removes all hate and all bitterness. Give me the hope that frees me from fear and despondency. Teach me to know Jesus Christ and to do his will. Amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor Thom. That
Sure.
was that was lovely and moving. Well, one of the voices that we want to share with you as we launch tonight's conversation is that of a familiar face, familiar from different contexts. Rick Steves, I think most of us know as a TV personality and PBS television's kind of favorite travel guide. But he's also a historian and author of a fascinating book called Travel as a Political Act, which he published in 2018. And we thought of Rick partly because last week, Pastor Thom actually had Rick as the special guest speaker giving the keynote address at this year's Bonhoeffer Festival. And Rick Steves talked about some of his perceptions of today's world and how they link up with the meaning and legacy of Bonhoeffer. And we were planning tonight to share with you a few minutes from Rick Steves' keynote address at the Bonhoeffer Festival. But then Pastor Thom sent us a sheepish email on Friday morning apologizing for technical difficulties that prevented them from recording it. But it's actually not a huge problem for the following reason, that I had actually seen the script that Rick Steves would be working from to give his a keynote address, and it's very similar to speeches that he has given in some other circumstances. So what we have been able to do actually is pull up an excerpt that we'd like to share with you, which is going to be very, very close to what he actually said in addressing the Bonhoeffer crowd. So now I'm going to share screen again, but this time go not to the slides, but to, let's see, say a prayer for me as I work on this. Say a prayer for me and for our technology. Clicking on share. Okay. Okay, I'm getting a kind of a weird setting. Okay, here we go. This is what I was looking for. And I think we're there. Mary Jo, does that look right? Okay, very good. What we're going to watch actually is the first 3.5 minutes of this speech that was given by Rick Steves in January of this year at the Edmonds Center for the Arts in Edmonds, Washington, which is actually where Rick Steves' girlfriend is a bishop of the Lutheran Church. And he does refer to her in the speech, although not in the 3.5 minute excerpt that we're going to watch. But I think you'll find this to be kind of an interesting, relevant, and potentially inspiring message to begin our evening with.
Thank you very much. It's so nice of you to all be here. I'm Rick Steves. Normally I'm talking about travel, but right now we're talking about something I think far more important. It's important to all of us. You know, I travel a lot. And I learn a lot about my home by leaving it and looking at it from a distance. All my life, and I've spent a quarter of my adult life living out of a 9x22 by 14-inch carry-on the airplane size suitcase. All my life, I've come home and I've appreciated our freedom and our democracy and good governance. As much as I love Europe, I am so thankful to be an American. What I see happening lately scares me. It really scares me. The MAGA movement is literally dismantling our American way of life. And what seems like just chaos and a reckless sort of destruction is actually a carefully planned out, intentional, step-by-step reordering of our society. They know what they're doing. It's reordering our society and it's threatening the entire world order. On this very stage, a little while ago, Mr. Joyful Blues, Elvin Bishop, was here himself to a crowd this big, singing his songs, and one of his main songs he rewrote the lyrics to fit what's going on right now in our country. And that song is "What the Hell's Going On?" And we all sang in a thunderous unison, people want to know. We're gathering today on the 250th year of our American democracy, hungry for the intangible value of being together, as our community shares a determination to stop this coup, to remain free and democratic. We've never had to do this before in our lifetimes. Across the USA, there's a crescendo of concern. People are rising up, they're waking up, and they're asking, what the hell is going on? Right here in Edmonds. I mean, we just announced this, and there's 2,000 people that signed up to spend their Friday evening together, inspiring each other. There's an intangible value of getting together. Now, I'm a traveler and I'm a historian. And I think that gives me a unique appreciation of what makes America great. Drawing on that experience, I appreciate what we have, and I also know what we can lose. Think about things that we often take for granted. good governance, stability, the rule of law, the importance of honoring societal norms. These are important blessings, and they are undervalued in normal times. We've skated right through in our lifetime. This is fundamental to really what does make America great. Now, our president is taking us, I believe, into a sad future. Not America first, but America intimidated, America alone. So here we are, defending the best way we can a democracy that we didn't realize could be so fragile.
Some pretty sobering words from a familiar face that normally we associate with good and happy times, but one that's offering a message of warning. But as I was watching this video, one thing that Rick said that really resonated with me as a member of Repair is his reference to the intangible value of getting together. So that's one of the reasons, I value these evenings when we can all get together and support one another, share our perceptions, and talk about what we can do together to join the battle that Rick Steves was talking about, to defend the things that we value so much about America. So, Pastor Thom, maybe with that backdrop, you'd like to start our discussion about
Sure.
Dietrich Bonhoeffer, how he dealt with some turning points in his life, and maybe what we can learn about the ones we face.
Exactly. And we're going to be given time in a little while to, and hopefully you've had, I guess, a few weeks now to think about and contemplate what have been some of the turning points in your life that affected who you are and your ministry, and who are maybe been some of the people that have been impactful on shaping who you are. And so in a little while, we'll have an opportunity to share that and kind of using Bonhoeffer as a kind of a context, because this is so true for him in his life. He had so many turning points that came about, and that little handout kind of highlights 10 turning points for him that stands out. There really are many more, but ones that really especially led him to the point where he finally uh, emphasized the importance of resistance, having the courage to speak out and make that commitment of essentially putting his faith into action by taking a stance against what he saw was the evil of Hitler and Nazism, and the just how it was undermining and undercutting the church, the society, and the world. And so there's lots of different factors that it didn't come to that point, without a lot of different people being a part of his life. And these turning points, those moments that really impacted him. So as you look over the sheet, it was, even right from the very beginning, he was impacted by the death of his brother. And we've kind of talked about some of these things. And in the movie, it covers it fairly well, too, that he was killed in World War I in action. And his brother was someone he idolized. And he was 12 years old when that happened. And he really struggled. Well, what's the purpose of someone dying so without purpose, without a reason? And what does this have to say about, in terms of violence and the whole idea of war? And couldn't there be a better way? And what does this say about our faith, too? And this was kind of a key point where for him in leading him that he wanted to do something different with his life, and especially look to the church, and maybe not so much the church as much as just look to finding another way than violence, and finding another way where community could be really important for helping people just even navigate through these times of loss, and trying to make sense of when a tragedy like this happens. And so this impacted his life immediately from that on. That's what he announced to his family when he was fairly young, that he wanted to become a pastor. And they were very, not very happy, I'd say, maybe. This is out of the realm of what they were accustomed to as a psychologist and psychiatrist. And they just felt that this was not. Oops, I'm getting some feedback, I guess, maybe. But that this was the kind of role that they expected. He was so brilliant at music, and thought that he would be a musician and be able to also probably teach at college level for that as well. But he had so many other gifts that they felt that this was kind of strange. But that was one of the things for first turning point. It led him that direction, because then as he went to study, he became in the area of theology and got his first degree, and then on to his first doctorate degree, and looking at the whole idea of basically community and being able to struggle with those big questions, and trying to find another way than the kind of the hatred and the that he experienced within the world as well. So as you can see, there are other turning points going right down the list. Was that he had an opportunity to study in Union Seminary, and again, part of this is he got his doctorate degree, but then he had to wait until he was 26 before he could become ordained Lutheran pastor. So he had kind of time on his hands. So then he went to Union Seminary, and that's where he not only met Reinhold Niebuhr, but probably the key factors was um, meeting the the introduction to Frank Fisher and the Abyssinian Baptist Church in Harlem, which gave him a whole new perspective on how do you live out your faith. And he was like, as he says, he was kind of like, felt like he was born anew through that experience where faith wasn't just an intellectual endeavor, it was involved the whole person. And so those relationships, those friendships became very important for him in kind of transforming him in his thinking about being pacifists, struggling with, again, what does the main question he kept always struggling with is, what is Christ for me today? What is that? How do I live out how Christ would ask us to live out? And so all of this came to a head when, and then kind of another key point was that when Hitler was appointed as chancellor, and then he had an opportunity to speak out when he, especially, and again, this is where he was influenced, because it kind of reminds me of what's going on in terms of birthright citizenship, because um, the friend of his was a pastor. He had Jewish background in his blood, I mean, essentially, and they stripped him from becoming a pastor because of that, even though it was a generation past. And essentially, this whole question started with, well, if someone has Jewish background, can they even be citizens? So I mean, it's a lot of very timely what we're kind of what's going on even today. But that was the very first where he said, "This isn't right. This is not right to especially when he's a good friend who he knows was a wonderful minister, and this should not be the case." And so he spoke out about the Jewish problem, and he was also related because he did see some evidence they where they were beginning to discriminate against those who were Jewish. And as he was speaking on the radio, then he was cut off, and that was probably the first time some of the Nazi, who was trying to push back against it, earmarked him and saw that he was the case, that he was someone who was speaking out, and I think he was, ever since that, he was kind of, I think, put on the list. So kind of going through it very quickly, but there's many so other cases of where this impacted him. He again was, because he was banned eventually from teaching at the university after that part where he became more and more um, seen as a threat to what was going on, and he continued to preach and speak. He always maintained being a pastor in a parish as well as the academic world, where he was always teaching. And then, but eventually he was banned from teaching. But then he was asked to direct this underground seminary in Finkenwald, and that's where I think he really was given the opportunity to ask the question again, well, what is ministry? How do we approach these in terms of resistance? How do we move forward in that regard? He had a chance to go to visit Gandhi, but chose not to do that because he wanted to direct this in Finkenwald, that underground seminary. And so, as you see the points, I'm just kind of going over it very quickly because I want to give you time to talk about, and hopefully now you're thinking of what would be some of the turning points or relationships that have impacted you. And but the one probably that I just want to read one part of it that really stands out, and that is things were getting more and more tense. He actually went to London for a while and served a German church there. Barth thought he was kind of copping out and leaving at that time, but in some ways he needed that kind of refreshment almost, or opportunity to kind of process it. He became very much involved in this whole confessing church movement, trying to align people up to be able to take a united front towards and kind of confront the German Christian church to change their position of being basically complacent to Hitler. So he was working very hard to try to get kind of a solidarity in that regard while he was in London and going around to different places. Then he had the opportunity to go back to New York. In fact, a lot of his friends had arranged for him to go back because they were getting more and more concerned about his own safety. And he went back, and they had arranged for him to be a professor there, and really were going to, kind of convince him to please stay and that not have to put your life on the line. But I just want to read what this is, in some ways, one of the most famous quotes that is in June of 1939. Okay, that's where we're at. And he got there, and it was only June 20th of 1939, in less than 3 weeks, he realized he had made a mistake, and he made a fateful decision to return to Nazi Germany. And this is such a kind of a powerful within our own lives, places where we make decisions and they have an impact on us um, for our whole lives. And this is one of those moments for Bonhoeffer. He writes, "I have made the mistake of coming to America. I must live through this difficult period of national history with the Christian people of Germany. I have no right to participate in the reconstruction of Christian life in Germany after the war if I do not share the trials of this time with my people. Christians in Germany will face a terrible alternative of either willing the defeat of their own nation in order that Christian civilization may survive, or willing the victory of their nation and thereby destroying civilization. I know which of these alternatives I must choose, but I cannot make the choice in security." Very, very powerful. I mean, to think of that's, and then he left. He caught the last ship back to Germany at that time and went back and that, and I just met someone the other day who happened to know Reinhard Niebuhr, and he wrote this letter to Reinhard Niebuhr. I actually knew him personally and shared with him when he got the letter and how he was heartbroken because he knew that Bonhoeffer, he admired him and respected him, but he was also just so devastated about losing a friend, and he thought he was such an intellect that was going to be shaping the church for years to come. But then at the same time, he felt he needed to support him as well. But so that's again, and I don't know when you can tell me when you want to stop because there's all these other aspects. When he returned, he became a part of the German military intelligence, and where again the influence of I mentioned before, I think about his brother-in-law was Jewish, and he helped them to escape to England, and so they survived. But they were the ones that really brought home to him that this was happening. The concentration camps, the death camps. He really didn't believe that was happening, and when that they helped to convince him. So again, the people in our lives help us, see things maybe when we really need to see them. and then eventually he was arrested. It's amazing from April 5th, 1943 to April 5th, 1945, 2 full years in prison. It was actually exactly when he was pronounced that he was to be executed. And it was just a few days later, April 9th, when he was executed. But to think of 2 years, and that's the part that we sometimes miss. And that's why I think one of the most important is the contribution of letters and papers from prison. And there again, unless one of his students, Bethgay, was the one that he wrote to primarily and kept those letters and kept what he had written. And this was not only just letters, but like it was like papers. He was doing a lot of theological work at the same time. And it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have those papers, which I think are so profound. And again, it was a friendship. This is one of his students, but they became very, very dear friends. And that's one of the ways that we are able to even know who Dietrich Bonhoeffer is. A lot of his other works, like Cost of Discipleship, that was kind of almost retroactive when we got some of his writings to have it be published, even though it was semi-published during his time. But he was working on ethics. It was what the last thing he was working on. Although the last thing, those who were maybe with me, that I presented this to the rabbi that was on the panel. The last thing he did, the last thing he worked and he actually got published was a book on the Psalms, because he felt so strongly that the God was present, Christ was present in the Jewish people who were suffering. And this was a key component, was for him, he grew up a rather elite, rather austere, and for him it was a real transformation, especially again back when he was in New York with the black churches, where he saw the discrimination and saw how people were being treated so poorly, that it really enabled him to move beyond his own kind of blinders to people that were poor, that were suffering. And then he really changed his whole tone, and so that we find Christ exactly in those who are from beneath and those who are suffering. That's where we actually find it. One of the most famous, the quote that he has that my Jewish rabbi loved to quote is that you can't sing Gregorian chants if you also if you are not willing to listen to the cries of the Jewish people. And so he really tuned into the fact that that's where you discover and experience Christ. And again, all these different relationships helped him form both not his theology, but his whole understanding, again, of who Christ is and how it needs to be lived out today. He did 2 doctorals. One was specifically on Christ in community. Well, the first one was actually he's trying to reconcile between higher criticism and Barth, and that was pretty technical, but of trying to reconcile those 2 camps. The second one was really especially after he served in Barcelona as a vicar, and so that was impactful. And he realized how important community was for him. So he wrote about basically the saints of community. We have this wonderful phrase, I wish we'd get more, was of Luther's, the priesthood of all believers. And that's something that he really embraced, that we discover the sainthood of all believers in community. And that's where we discover Christ, that Christ is primarily located within community. And that's what his second dissertation was all about. So, but tell me when to stop whenever you want.
Well, Pastor Thom, it's all so amazing and so enriching to hear you speak. I did have one a kind of comment and one question before we break into our breakout groups to begin to talk about some of the turning points in our own lives, maybe turning points that we're now facing. The comment relates to the quotation from Bonhoeffer that you read to us, where he talks about the terrible choice facing the German people between supporting the enemies of their country and supporting their own country as it destroys Christianity. And I couldn't help, I mean, that kind of resonates with me these days in a time when our country is involved in a war, and it's as a patriotic American, it's very difficult for me to look at our soldiers being sent into battle and to feel a deep sense of support for that mission. Obviously, I don't want harm to come to them, but I also I can't really feel that they represent the best of America as they go out on the mission that President Trump has sent them on. Um, so in a small
Yeah.
way, I can empathize with that horrible choice that Bonhoeffer was talking about. But then the question that I had in terms of turning points in Bonhoeffer's life, we talked a little bit about this in our first program, but maybe before we go into our breakout, you might talk a bit about a topic that comes up in the movies and the books about Bonhoeffer, which is the plot to assassinate Hitler. Was he involved? To what extent was he involved? Was he supportive of it, if not involved? And from all that you know, how do you think he dealt with? I mean, talk about a turning point or a moment of decision in your life to be a man of the cloth and yet to be faced with this choice of to take a step like to countenance or participate in violence in what could be certainly could be argued to be a just cause. What as far as you understand, what's the reality of that, and
Yeah.
what do you think we can again learn from Bonhoeffer's facing that, literally life or death decision?
It was definitely a struggle for him throughout his life. When he actually wrote the work in the book Ethics, that was a big part of it, was trying that whole question of do the ends justify the means and all of that kind of aspect. But it really is not, we're not exactly clear. I think he knew of the plot because his family was involved. His brother-in-laws were in the military and were actually the ones that planned the plot, and that's where eventually why he was executed was because his name was on the list as a part of the conspiracy to kill him. But whether or not he fully endorsed that, I think that's a good question, because to one degree, my sense is that he endorsed it only because it was his family, and he did, wonder aloud, would this change anything for Hitler to be out of the picture?
Mm.
Um, but I think there's it's the movie that we talked about, the latest movie about Bonhoeffer. That was one of my, I wrote a review of it, and that was one of my criticisms, was that they were playing to that a little bit more as the assassin, because it was good theater, good drama. And there's one scene where he talks to his friend about that now is the time we have to take action, meaning to kill Hitler. And I don't think that was exactly what Bonhoeffer would say something like that. So I took a little bit of issue with that. There is a book that, if you are interested in this whole area, it's really quite fascinating. It's called essentially Bonhoeffer, the Assassin. And it really goes into
But I
full.
see a question mark at the end of the word
It's a
assassin.
question mark because yes, exactly. Because I don't know if they are. This is challenging the myth, recovering his call to peacemaking. Now, this is written by three Mennonites, Quakers, so I think they got a little bit of an agenda of wanting to have him still be a pacifist, and because he's always been held up as a pacifist. I mean, that was the
And
part
we know he was fascinated by Gandhi and wanted to
in
go and
Gandhi.
study with Gandhi. So
He actually had wondered really aloud that if there was the same kind of that Gandhi had organized, the same kind of resistance, nonviolent resistance, would that work in Germany? If everybody, I mean, if there was a whole,
mhm.
like whole country all just stood up like they did in India, would
Yeah.
would be that successful? And I think finally Bonhoeffer, once he starts seeing the depth of the violence,
Mhm.
and just
Mhm.
that there was no moral scruples at all, then he really wondered, that he realized that that was not possible. I mean, it would be just massacre. And so
It's sad that Bonhoeffer did not live to see the American civil rights movement of the 60s and what Martin Luther King did with Gandhi's and Jesus's. Uh,
and Bonhoeffer,
and yes, oh,
yeah, he
he's a
actually was
blessing from
influenced
all
by
of them.
Bonhoeffer. Yeah.
So
So
Bonhoeffer, would have to imagine, would have been very inspired by Dr. King. So
yeah, and I mean, well, Dr. King was inspired by Bonhoeffer.
yeah, well,
He actually, in the Strength to Love book,
great minds think alike, as they
he
say.
mentions it in there, the Strength to Love. He mentions Bonhoeffer as another example
Mhm.
of pacifism, of a call to nonviolence. And so that's why, it gets a little bit controversial, because he does constantly, even when he was in prison, he would, he had opportunities possibly, and in the movie it brings out a little bit of that, where, he could shoot the guards, or, try to violently escape, and he chose not to, because he wanted to not he didn't want to take another person's life. And then he was actually offered to escape, and he decided not to, because he was afraid his family would be hurt if he did that. But essentially he still remained true. That I don't think there's a part where he would violently responded to some of the violence being done to him. And
Yeah.
so I think his personal example, he stayed true to it. But I think there was a part where he didn't want to. I mean, who wants to go against your family at the same time? I mean, he still was very allegiance to his family.
I
So
think E.M. Forster once wrote, if I had a choice between betraying my friend and betraying my country, I hope I would have the courage to betray my country. I
yeah,
don't know.
yeah,
I don't know if I
yeah,
would endorse that, but that's an interesting perspective.
yeah,
Now
yeah.
is
So
probably a good time for us to go into our breakout rooms. While I sort of work on that technologically, I'm going to break us into 4 breakout rooms. Pastor Tom, do you want to say a few words about what you'd encourage people to do during the 15 minutes or so that we'll break
yeah,
up?
I mean, essentially, again, without and making sure everybody has the time to talk, be sure you give everyone ample time, maybe even like 2, 3 minutes for each one, to pick out maybe 1 or 2 turning points in your own life, and that have affected you personally, and the decisions that you've made, as well as your ministry, things that, maybe again, turning points, events, or people that have been prominent in those experiences and those events that have shaped who you are. And it's kind of a good exercise of reflection on what just like for Bonhoeffer, what has shaped your own theology or your own personal values, and to be able to just to briefly share that with one another, so that everyone has a turn. But without going in a full depth, but what are the things that just kind of jump out, are high on the list? If you had a top 10, what would be the top 2 or 3 that would kind of stand out? But it's a wonderful exercise. I did this last November with a group of new pastors, and they went on and on. They took a long, enjoyed this very deeply.
Well, I'm going to open up the rooms now, and they'll be set to automatically last for 15 minutes. I suggest when you start your conversation, perhaps start by choosing one person to take notes who can then report back to the whole group. Everyone from the group, of course, when we come back together, everyone will be free to speak, but it'd be good sort of to have one spokesperson to start the conversation on your behalf. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So welcome back, everybody.
Well,
I hope you had some interesting conversations. Pastor Tom, you're there. Um,
Mhm.
how about having a report back from each of the groups, maybe some of the highlights of things that you all talked about that might be interesting to share. Group 1, who's your spokesperson? Did you
Okay,
select
Carl,
someone?
you expect me to remember my group number.
Yeah.
I was in a group.
it was great.
Maybe
Three. Okay,
all we need is one person from the group to remember the number.
right.
Mary Jo
Thanks,
was
Ann.
our person. I
Our
hate to
group
say
was
this, but
was group
with
one's uh note taker,
Scribe. Who was?
Barbara.
Barbara.
Oh,
Okay.
okay. I didn't realize which group.
Hi, Barbara.
Okay.
How's Sam, by the
Okay.
way? I don't. Where's Sam? I don't see him tonight.
Oh,
He
he's
good?
elsewhere.
Oh,
He's
okay.
elsewhere.
All
Yeah.
right. Hopefully, as long as it's someplace worthwhile.
I'll tell him you asked for him and missed him terribly.
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Okay.
did.
Well, Mary Jo shared that when she was a child, she was with her mother and she saw an elderly woman who had numbers tattooed on her arm. And her mother, explained what that was. And she was very, very shocked to see something like that was so concrete about a person's experience. And then that moved her, and later in college, she felt that she had to do something to really help people beyond just achieving in college something academic. And that, I guess, as you know, Carl, moved her to want to be a nurse. And that's, what she ended up doing. Um, and then Ida shared with us that when she was very young, when she was 12, her mother died. And so she and her siblings, I believe you said there were 5 siblings.
Yes.
With their father, they were left, and Ida was put in the position of having to help out, and there were very large age differences, and it was really a huge experience for her being in that position, and also for her father. But she accepted that she was needed to help the family, and although it was difficult, she just did what she had to do. So that was a huge turning point. And also for her father. And her father made the decision to keep everyone together and not have the different siblings go to different people. So it was a cohesive unit that was maintained. And Carolyn had a huge turning point that when she was a sophomore in college, she eloped, and then later got pregnant. And of course, her mother was very angry and, I guess, disappointed because her mother had different hopes for her. And Carolyn decided to change what she intended to study, and she had the idea to study teaching, and she made the decision to take her baby with her to college, which I can't even imagine, you know, doing that. But other women helped out. And she was in a college where there were very few Black women, so it was a majority white. And also, these were turbulent times going on around the time when Kennedy was assassinated. And then she mentioned that she decided to vote for the first time after some of the freedom riders, such as Goodman, Cheney, were murdered. So those were huge things that she had to go through. And then lastly, I mentioned what I felt was a turning point for me personally, was when my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And I was the only one left in my family because both of my other siblings were gone. Wow. To care for her. And my husband, Sam, did help me. But that was something that was, huge for me. But like Ida mentioned, it's like you just decide that you have to do it, and you just kind of go along and try to do what you can do. And that was it.
Wow. Wow. What amazing stories. What moments. I mean, life is something, isn't it?
I think it shows you that, no matter how difficult it is as you're going through it, that you realize at some point that you're a lot stronger than you imagined,
Yeah.
But you don't start out feeling that way.
Yeah, no, that's for sure.
And this is what democracy looks like. This is people's lives,
Yeah.
people living them richly, deeply, thoughtfully, caringly, and that's what we.
Yeah. And hearing about those individual lives intersecting with things happening in the world, whether it's the Holocaust or the murder of Cheney and Goodman. I mean, we're all so affected by all those, tides of history. How about group two?
I don't mind reporting in. We were just beginning to spiral down into profundities when we pulled back through into the main room. But in our group, we had Pastor Thom, myself, Gareth Evans, Hal Rourke, and then we had Anne, who we just heard from, and also Ginny. And Ginny took us on a journey of the heart when her father, herself, and the with grandchildren went to Holland, where he had been during the Second World War. And she painted an evocative picture around a pair of ragged shoes that I think were on the mantelpiece at home or in the living room, because these were shoes that he had worn when he walked, I believe, out of a concentration camp of some kind.
No, I'm sorry, it was my uncle.
Your uncle, thank you. He wore. And so there was something deeply profound about that, because it's like talk about walking in other people's shoes or through their story in their shoes, through that empathetic family history. There was just something very, very special about that evocation. And then Anne brought us back into the very present moment about family dynamics and a family system where we have people of different political opinions, and how she's navigating her own integrity in relation to a large group of siblings. There's about 11 of them at last count. And so her sort of claiming her voice and integrity in a family that's become very politicized, but in a certain kind of way that Pastor Thom sort of added a little Bonhoeffer context to, where Bonhoeffer was sort of remarking on what was the phrase? The stupidity.
Stupidity.
Yeah.
It's basically like being brainwashed.
Yeah. And how, in some ways, it sounds rather critical, but actually, when there's a compassion built into that, in that there can be propaganda, a system, we'll say fascistic propaganda, which can lead to a sort of brainwashing where people lose their capacity for critical thinking or really seeing themselves fully in the context that they're in. Which I thought was a definition, it was sort of like a working definition of grace, of some, I don't know, that we, then we were getting into the crucified Christ, weren't we, about, understand that.
Yeah, that for Bonhoeffer, that was always taking it back to how to be able to see where Christ lives, especially in the suffering of others.
Wow.
Yeah.
Powerful, powerful stuff. Ginny, thank you especially for that story. That's amazing. I feel like I want to hear it again from your lips and hear more about it. So maybe we'll look for an opportunity.
Another time, Carl.
Thank you. Group three.
I was the reporter, and I'm going to summarize for everybody rather than telling each story with names attached. Um, all of us talked about times of moral courage, and I don't need my Apple Wallet. Okay. We talked about work environments where we encountered bullies who had more power than we did, and uh, the challenge of speaking up to a work bully. The fact that, and this resonated backwards to me to Bonhoeffer, the fact that speaking up and speaking the truth with the best intentions doesn't always mean that you get a pat on the back and win. Instead, sometimes it means you get the boot. Although better things can come, none of us were assassinated after our endeavors. Another person who lost a job and in losing a job found another career that had much greater meaning and purpose. Another person who realized was at a turning point and ended up in late middle ages finding a new career, finding work that was meaningful, and other times of speaking out with another person in a church. It's a really hard thing to speak out in a church in particular. If you feel that what is being said from the pulpit is not of God. And what do you do with that? And I think the bottom line is that all of us at the end felt a sense of satisfaction in the actions that we took, while the payoff was never immediate.
Really interesting. Any comments or questions from anyone about that, Pastor Thom?
No, it is true. When you speak out, you can also get a lot of pushback or get ostracized, and it isn't always immediate results from your speaking out. Um, but at the same time, you have to ask yourself again, what's the purpose? How do you develop that courage to continue to do that,
Right.
regardless?
Right. And of course, we know sometimes there may not be a good result in the sense of success or victory,
Right.
but other times there can be. Sometimes you don't know
Mhm.
what kind of a seed you're planting in someone's mind that, a year or two later they may remember that moment. It may mean something to them. And so
Right.
we never know.
None of us felt at the final analysis, boy, I should have just kept my mouth shut.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
That's good.
yeah.
Well, thank you all for those moments of speaking out. And group four,
That must be our group. I didn't pay attention to the
whoever,
number.
yeah, whoever's left.
So it was Tam and Ellen and Laura and I, and our conversation went a little differently. I don't think there was actually any storytelling of any turning points. Um, the initial question that Tam raised was just like, well, I think Ellen and Tam both, they came to Bonhoeffer, they came to this not to reflect on their own lives, and were surprised by that move.
Right.
And that it seemed like there was an urgency of the moment that was driving them here, and to reflect on their own lives. There seemed to be a disconnect. So we thought about how, well, we're called to different vocations in our lives, and we're all called at this moment. We all came here for a reason, and there were things that motivated us along the way. So we didn't do any of that storytelling, but I think that sentiment was throughout the conversation, that there was an urgency, and there's something about Bonhoeffer's life and his most famous ultimate action of an attempted assassination that was so extreme that we're looking for the thing we are called to do in the midst of today. And so that kept coming up, like, well, what is it that we're supposed to be doing? What are we recruited into right now? Those turning points. And so given the three people that share their ages and that there's mobilities differences, vision, and all these, like, so what does that mean now? How does one engage? What are they being what are we all being called into?
Yeah.
So we did some brainstorming around that, and even some resource sharing among those in our group. So yeah, it went a different way, but it was a good connection and conversation.
That sounds very worthwhile, and it's so interesting. I wasn't in any of the four rooms, but they all sound so different and so unique, and so each one so interesting in its own way, which to me is fascinating. That sort of the same question, the same homework assignment produces such very different results, but I guess it grows out of what the people in each group needed and what they felt motivated to want to share and to wrestle with. So. It's all good as far as I can see. Pastor Thom,
Yeah.
you've done this exercise now with a number of groups. Any reflections on
Well, just
how
that
this
what the
evening went?
last group, I think, this session is to be able to kind of move us towards application. How do we take the learnings from Bonhoeffer, the inspiration, and apply it to our own situations, apply it to how do we, again, speak out as well as help others to become aware of it is. I know I get the pushback all the time. Well, it's not that bad. I mean, it's not, because Rick Steves started by he has this, and again, I hope everybody gets a chance to watch the story of fascism and how he has this wonderful way of just reminding us of how it came about, how it developed. I mean, it was a slow process of, and especially economically, a lot of people were looking to him to be a savior for economically. And I think of today, people, that seems to be the number one concern is their own economic situation and how Trump has spoken to that. And that's why he got elected again, essentially. And to be able to try to frame, well, how do you talk about moral and care for the other if you're just focused on the economic needs, which is, I think, part of where we're at, and that parallels with where Germany was at the same time of wanting to be strong, wanting to be great. And so, but that's kind of the question: is how do we take and there's all those moments of where even Bonhoeffer, um, had a struggle to how to apply this. Whether do I go off and be with Gandhi? Do I do the underground seminary? Do I stay in New York? So those are, I think, I like the fact that's what we all struggle with. Where in our own lives do we make these kind of decisions of how far do I remember one time Will Willimon, I've talked to him when we had a preaching seminar. I'll never forget I said it was during the Iraq War, and I said, well, what if you preach, you be prophetic, and then I lose a job and I've got two kids to take care of. I want to be prophetic and speak out and lots of all different issues. And he said something that I think Bonhoeffer would really have appreciated. He says, you love your people. You let them know that you love them. You're always, and Bonhoeffer really talks about this. He was always there for them. Whenever there was he did so many funerals, gosh, and he was there for the people. And I think they came eventually to, I don't know, actually completely buy what he was saying, but I think they came to trust him a little more. And that's what I found is, even though many disagreed with me, they knew that I cared about them and that I loved them, and they would be willing to listen to what I had to say, and they didn't just want to call for my immediate resignation, and and so, but that was interesting in my classes. I've always taught this course called The Role of Prophet and Pastor, Introduction to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, and I think it was a tightrope for him too, because many ways, it meant for him, it actually meant how far can he go without being finally captured and put in prison? And so it was even to that extent. And so it and I think again, people, like I say, well, we don't have people going off in detention camps and being executed. Well, last I heard, there was somewhere between 80 to 100 that have actually died in the detention camps. So you were not too far off from. I mean, and again, the thing is just like with the Jews. This is the part where I think really hits home. We for the economic thing, we have to have scapegoats.
Yeah.
And that's the part that I think within the church is really guilty of. We played right to that with immigrants and being, having to have someone to blame for our economic situation, and those are all factors that hit very close to home.
Yes.
That we need to deal with, and then
I'd like to just say that a few years ago, not that many, maybe 2 or 3, I read a book called The Boys in the Boat. I don't know if any of you have read that, but it made the hair stand up on the back of my head because I saw what was happening in this country that was so similar to what happened to those boys in the boat in that particular book. And at that time, the last of those boys was still alive. And so a good portion of what was said was so true. It is so frightening what is happening today.
Yeah.
It is so frightening. And if you read that book, it's called The Boys in the Boat, you will see exactly what's happening today.
It is a great book. Thank you for mentioning that, Carolyn.
Sorry.
Well, all the talk about how do we apply what we can learn from Bonhoeffer, or what are we called to do? Those are kind of good questions to move toward as we come toward the end of our session. We always try to end around 9 because we've been trying, especially this year, but I think we're going to make it a regular practice to end each of our programs with some recommended actions. And for tonight's program, we thought what we would use is a list of to-dos that Rick Steves himself offers at the end of his presentations about fascism. I'm assuming you're seeing action steps to consider on your screen now. And I'll share with you. So if you go to Rick Steves' website and watch any of his programs where he talks about fascism, he generally does end with these 9 recommendations. He heads it as things we need to do to win, but you could also think of them as things we're called to do. So I'll just share these 9 with you as a kind of a final note for our evening. So his 9 recommendations. 1, embrace uncomfortable coalitions, both center and left working together. The political left needs the middle. It can't be 100% pure and win or make lasting change. So be prepared to enter into coalitions with people that you don't necessarily agree with on everything. 2, a broad society-wide resistance movement is needed to stop this coup. 3, we're each influential in our own realm. Be active in
your lane where you have some standing.
Be active in your lane where you have some standing. And Rick Steves, in his speech, goes into one specific example. He says, what if you are a member of Rotary? He says the Rotarians have what they call the 4-way test that they're supposed to apply to everything they think, say, or do. And the 4 ways are, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? He said, if you're a Rotarian, start reminding your fellow Rotarians about that 4-way test and saying, are we applying this to everything in our lives and to our society as a whole? Each of us is involved in organizations, communities where we have some influence and where there often are very good values in place, but they need to be defended, stood up for, and we need to remind one another about them. And that's one of Rick Steves' points. His fourth recommendation, empower existing organizations with your support. Believe you make a difference. So there's lots of good groups that are out there fighting the good fight. Look for ways to support them, money, time, any other way. Five, when we rally and speak out, do it boldly. We can create an ongoing, ever stronger grassroots organization. Six, very important, we must be nonviolent. Don't take the bait. The bad guys are looking for an excuse to declare an emergency. They have troops primed and ready. Don't make it easy for them to do that. Instead, be rigorously nonviolent at all times. Seven, do not obey in advance. Fascists love it when you are intimidated into complying voluntarily. You know, in the business world, I look at a lot of companies that are now scrubbing diversity and inclusion from their websites without even being asked to do so, but just because they think, well, this is out of favor now, and maybe we'll get in trouble somewhere down the line if we continue to stand up for inclusion. That's an example of obeying in advance, and we mustn't get sucked into doing that. Eight, stand firm early. It's easier to resist before authoritarian control is established. And above all, we need to be in solidarity. And Rick Steves says, remember the shipyard workers in Poland standing against the USSR, Estonians, Latvians, and Lithuanians literally joining hands, stretching across the Baltic, and ultimately bringing down the Soviet Union, and the solidarity of the EU about Greenland, which protected Greenland from Trump's attempt to take it over. So if we stand together, we have much more power. That's one of Rick Steves' points. So in terms of a to-do list or some ideas about what we might be called to do, this might be some food for thought.
Yeah. Well, I would add being from Minneapolis myself. I would definitely add Minneapolis and what we saw there, and their bold. I mean, 20 below. I love. There was one where it was all these people that were about 80, over 80. Did you see that one where they sat down in front of the office where they had their neighbors had been taken, and they said, "We're not going to leave here until you let them free." And even though they're going to suffer frostbite or whatever, they just were determined. And sure enough, they did release. You probably saw that on the news.
Yeah, Minnesotans were amazing, and of course, including many church people. So, for whom we thank God, of course. So it's been quite an evening, Carolyn. Before we're going to thank Pastor Thom in a moment, but Carolyn, do you want to kind of go through our last concluding messages before we say goodnight?
Well, I want to say we are Repair. We are the Rivertown's Episcopal Parishes Action on Inclusion and Race. And if you would like to receive our monthly e-newsletter, send a request to info@repairrivertowns.org, and you will get it anytime, all the time. And we thank you so much for participating in Repair tonight. Rivertown's Episcopal Parishes, don't forget that. Action on Inclusion and Race. And I love the word action because that's what we've got to do.
Pastor
We've got to
Thom,
act.
thank you, Carolyn. You are so right. And Pastor Thom, we're so grateful to you for giving us a couple of evenings and sharing such inspiring and amazing information. I mean, you're a fount of joy as well as of facts, knowledge, and spiritual wisdom. So thank you for being with us. It's been
Thank you. I really have enjoyed getting to know you a little bit more, and it warms my heart to know that there's such a powerful group on the East Coast that is doing the work that we need to be done, and we do have these examples, and that always warmed Bonhoeffer's heart was that he did find common those to be able to stand alongside him. And that really made a difference in his own journey, was to have that. And then that's for all of us, is to be able to affirm those that are standing beside us and really watch out for them and take care of them, and then be able to take care of ourselves.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Thank you. We're working on plans for future meetings, so watch your inbox, and you'll be hearing about them all soon. So thank you all for coming, everybody.
Thank you, Carl, for
You want me
everything
to
you do.
closing
Thank you,
Thank you,
Carl.
guys.
a
Thank you
closing
all.
meditation? I got
Oh,
to close.
so sorry. Yes, yes, yes.
I've got
Please,
prepared
Pastor Tom.
a
Yes, thank you.
closing word from Bonhoeffer for all of us. This is again from the book I Want to Live These Days with You, and it's what I actually closed at the Bonhoeffer Festival. For those who are watching on the Zoom, I just find these words especially appropriate for. It sounds like for your group, for all those, is that how to be able to really identify with the other and not exclude, but to be able to see that this is where we discover the face of Christ or the face of God in the other, especially those who are suffering. He writes, it's an experience of incomparable value that we have learned to see the great events of world history from below, from the perspective of the excluded, the suspect, the poorly treated, the powerlessness, the oppressed, and the ridiculed. In short, those who suffer. Only if bitterness and envy would not eaten up our heart can we then see with new eyes the great and small, fortune and misfortune, strength and weakness. Our view of greatness, humility, right, and mercy has become clearer and freer and more incorporable. For observing and actively exploring the world, personal suffering has become more a useful key, a more fruitful principle than personal fortune. It all depends on our not letting this perspective from below make us biased in favor of the eternally unsatisfied. Rather, out of higher satisfaction that is actually grounded from beyond, below, and above, we must do justice to life in all of its dimensions, and in that way, affirm life.
Amen.